Good morning, and thank you to the Future of Utilities. I'm Matthew Timms. I'm joining you from the UK today. It's great to be here. I'm the Chief Digital and Technology Officer for E.ON across our group. Today, what I'd like to do is to spend a bit of time to reflect on the role and responsibilities that energy companies have in building a sustainable future. As we will hear later on today, I'm sure that energy companies and utility companies are critical infrastructure and actually critical for the way that society is able to operate. And during this crisis, at a time where we see society coming apart at the seams in many ways, it's really essential that we are able to deliver the services that we do to our customers. And so I'd like to talk a bit about that responsibility. And how we all need to come together as organizations, as society, to really tackle one of the most intractable problems that we have facing society today. So if I could just start by sharing with you just one of the slides that you normally see exclaiming and marveling at the invention of humanity over the last years. And it really is truly incredible, the changes that we've seen. However, these changes come with unintended consequences. Ultimately, when we look at things like the Industrial Revolution, that was really the start of the issues that we see now with climate change. When you see the advances that we had with the internet, that was all about connecting people and bringing us together. The unintended consequence now we see with social media and the monetization of our data and the usage of that data against us is that actually we start to see that some of that is being weaponized and being used against us to influence elections and so on. So we see with this incredible change that we take and that humanity is going through, we have a whole set of unintended consequences that are coming with it. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big believer in technology. Technology is my career, and I love delivering technology and technology change. However, when you start to see the changes that we bring about through some of these things, we have to take a moment and just reflect on that. So that exponential change that we saw on the last slide, that was quite incredible. But when you look at exponential change in climate change, it's something that you really need to start to reflect on. This exponential chart that I'm showing you here really must draw our attention as society and as our industry here. What you see here, and actually it's a very different scale that you look at here. This is a geographical scale, and actually everything that you saw on the previous chart has happened in a blink of an eye in terms of the way that everything has been developing. Over the last 400,000 years, CO2 and therefore temperature has been pretty consistent. And that consistency has allowed humanity to develop. We haven't seen big temperature fluctuations. We've really been operating in a Garden of Eden period, which has allowed society and humanity to develop all these amazing things that I showed you on the slide before. However, the unintended consequence is now that as we pump more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, we're seeing really significant climate change and real impact. I saw today another massive fire in Australia, and we've seen fires in America. And all over the world, we're seeing climate change really having an impact. And this is something that humanity has to tackle. And as an industry, we have an opportunity to step forward and support society, support humanity in this change. If you look at this slide here, this kind of gives us an indication of just what's happened. If you go to Switzerland or you go to Iceland now, the trails are actually trails that are this is where the glacier was in the 1920s or the 1900s, and you have kilometers to walk to actually get back to where the glacier is now. And these changes are just something that we've really got to start looking at in a very serious way and start tackling together as a single organization. And this comes down to all of us. And sorry to Marks and Spencer's for this. I mean, there's so many things that are wrong with having this packet of blueberries in the morning for your breakfast, and I'm also guilty of that. These are things that we all have to change. Let's just take a look at this at a moment. I mean, look at the significant amount of plastic that's being used in this packaging, and we have to consider: can we afford to fly our blueberries from Peru halfway around the world and actually have those then delivered to us on our desk? So things like the plant-based diet are things that we can all do to actually start to make a difference to the way that we are operating. But that in itself will not be enough. And as society, we need to come together those individual sacrifices that we're making have to come to something bigger. And the great news is that actually society has woken up to this. We know that to actually bring us to zero emissions in terms of CO2, the whole of society, all of the companies will need to come together. No one company can solve this issue. E.ON can't solve it. Any of the other energy companies can't solve it. But together, we can make a significant difference. And I think that's one of the things that we need to look at. We see now that governments are also starting to wake up to this, probably driven by some of the societal upheaval that you see. And I think that if you look at the type of things that governments have started to do, the EU with the Green Deal, fantastic step forward. In the UK as well, we're starting to see now that the government, in fact, there was a kind of an arms race recently with how many trees were going to be planted at the last election. And the UK has now committed 12 billion investment in a green recovery. And also China, which actually is now is one of the biggest producers of carbon dioxide, has pledged to get over the peak of carbon dioxide output and become carbon neutral by 2060. All of which is great news. And I think also in the US now, we're going to see a more nuanced view of how the environment is going. So all of these things are picking up and are great news for us in terms of driving it. Some of the things that we are going to have to do, though, is start to look at how we drive that consumer adoption. How can we ensure that the industry is able to bring these affordable solutions to customers? And that's going to require us to think a little bit more about the impact of CO2. You know, for example, should we be having higher pricing of CO2 as a starting point? Should we be incentivizing people to actually move to new technological solutions? At all points, we've seen these industrial changes, and actually it's fascinating to see that energy has actually been very much a critical part of these industrial revolutions. Everything from even the agricultural revolution through to the industrial revolution with steam engines, mass productions, and of course we've moved into a digital revolution and things like Industry 4.0. However, those things are great and have been great, and they've taken humanity forward. But what we're really going to need to see is how do we come together as society? And actually, Rachel Botsman, who's I think based at Oxford University, is very interesting. I think she originally came up with the collaborative consumption concept. At least if you look at some of the things that we've had at the moment, it's just not working. And we need to put in a new model of how we would all work together, how we will collaborate to consume things in a way that's going to be helpful for the environment. And of course, energy companies can step forward in this. We can help support and transform the way that society is able to consume energy. We can do things like driving and being at the forefront of electrification. We can come up with more sustainable solutions. We can do things like demand response. We can smartify our grids. We can start looking at offering different types of services, all powered by digitization, all powered by data that enables us as a company to actually make a sustainable difference. What do we need to do as companies? And I think from a technology perspective, when you look at some of the changes that we've seen over the last years, this is going to require a fundamental transformation. The digitization of the cores of our business will be the thing that enables us to operate and deliver these new services in the future. The technology of the past is just not going to be good enough. We need to be more flexible. We need to be more agile in the way that we're able to meet the needs of our customers and the needs of society overall. So energy companies have got a significant legacy of technology that has to be digitized, and that has to be implemented at the core of the business. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Data is really where the gold rush is at the moment. As I mentioned earlier on, all of our data has really been monetized, and in many ways the data has been used in some packs, and in particular when you look at the influencing of elections has been used against us. But for us as energy companies, we can actually use data to become far more effective in how we're tackling solutions for customers. The combination of data, assets, and digitization will allow us to do things that we've never done before. We'll also be able to look at how we can drive growth for our businesses, which is obviously a good thing, across adjacent sectors, coupling sectors together so that we're actually collaborating in the way that we're driving this. E.ON has been going through a huge transformation over the last years, and I see that Octopus Energy is also one of the speakers today. And we're using the Kraken platform in the UK to really fundamentally drive the transformation of our business. And that makes us more agile, it makes us more cost efficient. And if we're more cost efficient, it means that we can invest more in delivering new solutions to our customers and coming up with the great next thing that we need to do. So E.ON Next is part of our fundamental transformation, it's part of our digitization of our organization. And we have something similar that we've developed in Germany as well, called DA Neo, or the Digital Attacker. And these are fundamentally attacking things like the cost in our business, attacking poor customer service, attacking our cost to serve, all of which is going to really allow us to be more efficient, be more agile, and actually create a better engagement with customers. These platforms now have already migrated millions of customers, and those customers are operating on those platforms already, and that's part of our fundamental transformation and digitization. We're also working on things that are really, really fascinating. So, of course, it goes without saying that there are certain use cases that we have, and in particular the vehicle to grid use case, where we see that actually traditional computing is just not going to be good enough. When you have millions of vehicles connected to the grid and other assets connected to the grid, the ability to be able to forecast and utilize those and do bid optimization and live steering just won't be possible using normal computing. And we're already developing and have developed algorithms that we're running on D-Wave computers that allow us to actually take advantage of quantum computing and the benefits that really brings. So we want to put digitization and innovation at the core of what we're doing to allow us to actually be far more effective and ensure that our company is really ready for the transition that's going to be needed. If you look at data, and data is really the starting point. I mean, if we're really, really honest, customers just aren't engaged with energy. It's very difficult to know how much energy I'm consuming. Yes, we're rolling out smart meters and we have these nice displays in houses, but truly, do consumers really understand, and therefore can they really engage with energy to help them sort of go through this transformation that we need to do from an industry perspective? So we want to really make sure that we put data at the heart of what we're doing in our business. Data is such a significant asset that we can use to drive the engagement with customers and actually help customers through this energy transition. If you look at how we're also using data, this is an example of the data that we're able to pull from our grids, combining that with IoT and sensoric data, adding weather data into that allows us to actually apply algos into our business, or algorithms into our business, use AI to help us to digitize our grid and prepare ourselves for a decentral future where we're going to have to be much more flexible. We're going to have to be able to change that much, far more quickly as customer needs are changing, and we see more decentralized energy assets being added into the grids. The great thing about data as well is that actually we can play that data back to our customers. And this is an example of what we're doing for municipalities in Germany. So with the data that we get from our grids, the data that we have in our platforms and our systems, we can present that back to our customers and actually help them really understand how they're consuming energy. And ultimately, this will lead us towards the point where we have assets, or we have people that are developing and implementing renewable and sustainable assets on our grids, and they're able to share the energy that they're producing, so that we add additional flexibility, and we're able to balance the way that the grids are working in a far more data-driven and AI-driven way. We also want to give back as well from a society perspective, and I think that data really allows us to actually show people how, one, they're consuming data at the lowest level, but overall, if you're in a city, how sustainable is your city? What we can do is combine energy usage with environmental data, with e-car, e-mobility data, air quality, road network, and public transport, to really start to show different parts of a city how sustainable they are and what actions that they can potentially take to improve the overall sustainability of the city, and actually, to be fair, to be able to bring pressure on governments and organizations to make change as well. We're also very excited about how we can combine assets, data and software to combine and bring them together to deliver new business models for the future. I talked about things like sector coupling and moving into adjacent business models and area. What I love is the fact that combining data, the digitization with the assets that you're able to deliver to customers, is that you bring up whole new business models. You allow people to interact with energy in a very, very different way. We have a number of solutions that we're delivering to customers in this area, which is incredibly exciting. All sustainably driven, all sustainable solutions that help our customers to actually really tackle climate change. Starting from Eon Home, which is where we're looking at being able to deliver heat pumps or solar, batteries, e-mobility solutions into our customers, all of which is controlled through technology, and the customer becomes in control. Of course, at a certain point, we also want to ensure that we're able to steer assets as well. And this is something that's going to be really, really interesting. And actually, I spoke a bit about when I mentioned quantum. But ultimately, the combination of assets, digital and software, will define new business models. It will define a whole new way of working with customers, whether it's e-mobility solutions, district heating, or the digitization of our grids. When you look at the thermal flows in our cities, what you really see is how much energy that we're actually wasting. This is all potential energy that we could reapply, reuse in a collaborative way if we come together. So this is an infrared spectrum, and it just demonstrates how much energy is kind of being lost within the cities. The great news is that we're also starting to see situations where we're actually able to bring those steerable assets, combine them with buildings, combine them with where people are living, to really deliver a grid, a heating grid that is fully connected, is fully steerable and digitized, and we've done this with Medicon Village in Sweden. Here you see the impact of this, and of course, this is just the starting point. As we roll out more solutions, we expect that we're going to save more money. In Sweden, again, we did a pilot with the Swedish village of Simrus. This was the first energy system that was 100% local, 100% sustainable, where we were able to combine technology, assets, and the data to allow that village to be able to go fully off-grid. This was something that actually I think is just incredibly powerful to have a look at. In the UK specifically, we're working in the Elephant and Castle district, where we'll be looking at delivering a heating network for that area that will be zero carbon compliant or standard. So in summary, I think I've run through quite a quick number of things there. The fundamental point that I'm making is that climate change is a really intractable problem that requires us all to work together. No one company, no one person can solve what we need to do. Energy and utility companies are at the heart of supporting a sustainable future. All of us are going to need to come together to make it work. We need to prepare our businesses. We need to digitize so that we're more agile and more flexible, so that we can be a real part of changing and driving this sustainable future that we all want to see. Thank you.
Matthew, thank you for that presentation. It was excellent, really well put together and incredibly comprehensive. You packed so much in this short space of time, and thank you so much for that. I'm sure that those who are actually watching this presentation, they'll have questions which they'll want to put to you. But I want to start first by bringing in our industry experts, Tony McCandless and Richard Postons. Thank you so much for listening in to that. I mean, Richard, let me start first with your perception of that. I mean, what were the key takeaways that you gleaned from that presentation?
Well, it was a great presentation from Matthew. I think he laid out some of the key macro challenges we face, and both as individuals, as companies, sectors, and society as a whole. And I really like the point to think about these as horizons. How do companies drive their own carbon neutrality? How might we then use the data and technology to enable the sectors they serve to decarbonise? And ultimately, how does this decarbonise society? I also agree with his point about the potential and criticality of being data-driven. I've seen firsthand how hard this is. And my personal prediction, Julia, is that not every company is going to make it. They're not going to become data-driven. A wise lady said to me that ideas are cheap, but execution is hard. So I'm really looking forward to the coming presentations, and I'll be listening really hard. Yes, the technology possibilities. I'm just smiling to myself at the thought of saying to Tony, we want to install a quantum computer. The technology possibilities are great, but I'm going to be really listening hard for how they're going to execute those to turn them into outcomes. So it should be a great session to follow. Absolutely. And Tony, your response, please.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic actually to see the alignment between, the kind of energy side, water side, so many key messages, environmental and climate change. It's quite interesting. We've had all the deniers for a long time, where everybody else is dealing with the fact of the matter. And it's great to see, companies like E.ON take that very, very seriously and actually give some data behind it as well. And then we move on to the data piece. And again, lovely to hear Matthew talk about ethical use of data, because we all know about when data is out there, how organizations who have, let's say, less positive intent can corrupt use of that data. And we all, as data guardians, have got to make sure it's used for the good of society, responding in line. I never expected to meet anyone more obsessive than our friends who are farmers, being obsessed with the weather, until I moved into utilities, where, weather forecasts we live and die by. We mobilize huge numbers of people to be able to respond to what we see coming. And then I think the last point really, and a really critical one that Matthew calls out, it's a wake-up call for actually the truth about sustainability of cities. So, from a Thames Water perspective, we're working to a horizon, not being alarmist, but being able to see the growth in population get to a critical point where, we need to get better at what we do in order to keep water production and waste management actually functioning for that growth. So if we all come together and actually start talking about the sustainability of large cities, I think it will focus everybody, and then, we can move ahead. Really good, great presentation. Thank you, Matthew.
Absolutely. I mean, a really positive message there. And I'd like to give the final word to Matthew, because look, really, it was a wonderful presentation. It raised so many questions as well, but also issued many challenges, not just for those in the industry, but for those of us outside. What is the message that you want to put out there for everyone to take away with them?
Yeah, it's well, first of all, I think that the key message is that we have a huge role that we can play. The ask is that we all step forward. In some ways, we're competitors, but ultimately we're not really competing when it comes to environmental matters. It's the more that our customers are adopting these solutions, the more that we can influence change in society, change in government, to support and drive this change that we all want to see, the better. So ultimately, it's about a collaborative future, how we consume the resources on the planet. We cannot continue to consume resources in the way that we've done in the past. And we're all responsible. We do it somehow unknowingly. My blueberry example being a perfect example of that, with this huge plastic and the fact that it's been flown from Peru, for crying out loud. Having those in the winter is nice, but is it really required? So it's just one of those things where, I think that's the joy of the industry that we're working in at the moment. Actually, it allows us to bring in real talent, actually, and actually culture is one of the things that underpins a lot of the work that we do. The teams that we bring together have been fantastic. I mean, we couldn't test algorithms for vehicle to grid concepts on quantum computing without the capabilities and the attraction of our industry to people like that. I mean, these people are in huge demand. So we're doing some really cool stuff, and that's right the way across the industry. And from a technology perspective, I would just call out the need to support this digitization at the core, because I think Richard mentioned it, not everyone maybe survive. And the reason we won't survive as companies will be because we haven't fundamentally transformed our technology infrastructure. It will drag us behind. We will not be able to operate in the market, which is very competitive.
Right, but there's a lot happening in that space and so much to feel excited about and hopeful for. But thank you both. Well, thank you all of you for those insights and again, that brilliant presentation. But that is the end, in fact, of our first presentation. And next up, we're lucky enough to be in conversation with more giants, more titans from the energy utilities section coming up after this short break.